I pissed my teacher off. Story time. So when I was younger, I wasn't necessarily a bad kid, but I had a really smart mouth. Like, if I felt like I was being disrespected, even if you were an adult, I would disrespect you back. And sometimes it would get me into a lot of trouble. So I used to have this teacher and her name was Miss Wiener. I wish I was making that up, but her actual name is Miss Wiener. And she was one of the worst teachers I've ever had. Like, super strict for no reason. She was the type of teacher to keep you after the bell rang. Anyways, one day after I had gym, I was all hot, all sweaty, so I decided to take my water bottle to Miss Wiener's class. So I'm in her class, sitting at my desk, and I'm drinking my water bottle, and Miss Wiener comes up to me, catches this nasty attitude, and she's like, "No food, no drink in my classroom." And she snatches my water bottle out my hand and throws it into the trash can. And I said, "Miss Wiener, you remind me of my grandmother's bird. Evil, and I wish you were dead." She was so pissed.
I, 36-year-old male, have a 16-year-old daughter. I have full custody of her because her mom had a mental breakdown and has been in and out of rehab. This January, I started dating my girlfriend who's 21 years old. Then quarantine happened, and that time apart made me realize that I wanted to spend my life with her. So I proposed in May and she moved in, and our wedding is in October. Since then, my daughter has been a nightmare. She and my younger sister, who's 25, keep calling my fiance the kid. My fiance decides to invite my daughter out to go shopping. She kept trying to set a date, but my daughter kept saying she had an extracurricular activity she needed to tend to. So yesterday, when my daughter once again made up the excuse, I decided to follow her car. She ended up pulling to a diner, and I realized she was grabbing lunch with my younger sister. I was beyond furious. First at my sister for enabling toxic behavior, and second at my daughter for lying to her future stepmom. I ended up taking her car keys away from her. Her aunt then called and said I had no right to do so. I explained that she would not be getting the car back until she makes an attempt to bond with her stepmom. I just want my fiance to be accepted into the family.
Picture this. You spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on a luxury villa in a private island. You are promised to be flown in on a private jet, have top chefs make your food, see some of the best artists in the world. Seemingly on social media, big influencers might be there, such as Hailey Bieber, Kendall Jenner. But instead, what you spent thousands of dollars on was chaos. You are stuck on an island in an abandoned construction site with 5,000 other people, unable to find your luggage, fighting for people over wet mattresses, and unsure of when you're going to be able to go home. Oh yes, and this is your Top Chef food, by the way. This was literally supposed to be the greatest music festival of all time, and instead ended up being one of the biggest scams of all time. So how exactly did we get here? Billy McFarland, who happened to be a young entrepreneur, along with his friend Ja Rule, the rapper, were flying whenever they came across a private island. This island, called Norman's Cay, was previously owned by Pablo Escobar. Part 2 to Fire Festival. According to the FBI, Billy had everyone fooled. He wasn't necessarily a serial entrepreneur, he was a serial scammer. And this provided to be his biggest one. After seeing this island, he wanted to host a music festival that was straight out of a dream. Festivals usually take about 12 months to plan. Billy thought that he could put it together in 8 weeks. He started by gathering all the top influencers, Hailey Bieber, Bella Hadid, and put them together for a massive promotional video. He had other big influencers such as Kendall Jenner post an orange tile to their Instagram to give the impression that they were going, even though they weren't, and they were paid like $200,000 to post this. This caused a significant amount of hype. It was all over social media. The news was covering it, articles were being written. So whenever tickets came out, it was sold out to 5,000 people immediately. People spending extra for nicer beachfront 8-person villas. While the island's one request to Billy was that he doesn't bring up that it's Pablo Escobar's island. And what does he do within the first promo? Says that this island was previously owned by Pablo Escobar. So he was kicked off that day and had to go somewhere else. Part 3 to Fire Festival. Even though he had to go somewhere else due to all the hype, he was getting in major deals. Major Lazer, Pusha T, Blink-182, and Billy had involved so many investors into this that there was no way that he could back out because he used the money from the investors on the project. He ends up flying around until he finds the island of Great Exuma, which is not a private island. However, on the website, they edit it to make it look like it is. And they find an abandoned development site. No buildings, no villas. Yet they still advertise as if there are. They end up finding tents left over from Hurricane Michael and say, yup, this is good enough. So the production team is extremely worried and they're like, hey, we're gonna have to post pictures of what this looks like so people can decide if they want to come or not. Billy responds by just firing them. Somehow he thought people were just gonna show up and be okay with this after spending all that money. And to get more money, they implemented cashless wristbands, like asking people who already paid to send them extra money for their wristband. While people are concerned and asking questions on their social media, but they turned off their comments. Soon it was time for people to show up. Part 4 to Fire Festival. Because they weren't really answering people's problems, Blink-182 was the first one to drop out. And then the night before people were supposed to show up, a storm hit, soaking and ruining everything that they had set up previously. Yet for Billy, canceling was still not an option. They oversold and there wasn't even going to be enough beds for staff. Well, the plane flew in, bringing in all the guests. And to distract them from the actual site, they bussed them over to a restaurant at the end of the island and just fed them alcohol for 6 hours straight. So what they thought was a pre-party was actually just a diversion. Eventually, they were like, we can't just leave them here. We're gonna have to bus them over. So once the people that paid thousands of dollars saw this campsite, you can just imagine the reaction. They were confused, shocked, and didn't have their luggage, but they just kept feeding them alcohol. That night, they finally brought out all the luggage and told people to just go claim it, so there was no order. And Billy walked out and said everyone who bought a villa can just pick out a tent. And this is when the chaos began. Hundreds of people broke out, sprinting for a tent. Part 5 to Fire Festival. You can literally see from these photos how chaotic it was. And it didn't take long for social media to find out. This was blasted everywhere the next day, and the most famous thing to come out of it was this cheese sandwich. Their luxury meals. This particular island was also on a very famous holiday for them, so none of the hotels or resorts nearby could take anyone. All of the music acts canceled. And by that day, Billy and Fire Festival was viral. He tried to play it off like this result was out of his control, even though it was completely in his control. He canceled the event, but there wasn't enough planes to fly people back. So people were legitimately stuck there with no food, no water, no air conditioning. Because remember, this was supposed to be a cashless event. And all the locals who helped set up and were never paid started an angry mob. He promised that there would be a 2018 festival, but it never happened. Billy and Ja Rule were sued for $100 million in a class action lawsuit and sentenced to 6 years of prison.